Sweet. Cool. So do you wanna kick it off, or you want me to kick it off?
Um, well, if if you want to kick it off and set the scope of the conversation, I can hopefully
Yep.
provide content related to the web ID, but
Yeah.
I'm not sure what um the main subject of our gathering is at
Yep.
the moment.
So um I'm trying to think of the best way to visualize it. Um I can draw in real time or just show some code. Whatever you think is better. I mean, yeah, I'll just draw it in real time.
Okay.
Let me share my screen, because we're gonna have to do a lot of file system operations, like more and more as we do stuff. Yes, I use Edge. Don't make fun of me. So
Are you on Windows
no, no, I'm not like John.
and you're using Edge? I was like,
No,
okay.
definitely not. No, no, no shade against Windows. It's not my cup of tea. All right, so I'm trying to think of maybe there's some stuff I have already handy to use it. Um, Not really, it looks like. We will need to like visualize some of the web IDE stuff. So actually, let me I'll share this as a session, and then you guys can hop in. Should we add it to the meeting notes, I'm assuming?
Well, that's a good idea.
Let me do that. Okay. Aaron with the amazing notes as usual. Okay. So let me know if you can't get into that. There's got a bunch of stuff that I wrote over time. But we can probably steal some of these graphics here. Yeah, let's just steal this. Okay, so I'm gonna go to the right. So if you go to the right, you zoom out, I'm gonna paste it right here and kind of get rid of a lot of this stuff. Um, so we have the main common code, right? Um, and I'll just put the goal is to be able to perform file system operations in both language or in the language server, right? And on desktop, that's relatively easy, right? Because we can just use Node.
Hmm.
So let me delete this, all of this stuff here. And the way I'm writing the code, I'll explain kind of what we're doing now, and the different modules that we have. So right now, there are 3 modules. As one additionally that I just sent to Lena for review. And that's really it's a full-blown FS module. So I think we're going to be able to migrate one. So right now we have this thing called the file resolver. This needs to read files. And then we have the directory walker. This is, I think we're gonna need to keep, because this does 2 things. This allows the caller to traverse a directory and resolve, like, get every single file from that directory. Traverse directory and get all files like inside of the direct and like the nested directories, etc. And I'll break down what it uses under the hood. And also it with the new work that we're doing, sets up a file watcher. So we need also a file watcher. And I know, Paul, you're probably ready to jump in, but one more thing, and that is the new FS client. And this is what isomorphic get. So I'll paste isomorphic get in the Google Doc here. We're going to use isomorphic get to perform a lot of get operations, because when we for context, when I did a security review for this whole injected context architecture, which the TLDR for injected context is like you basically should be able to find files on your system, just like in, VS Code, you'd press Command P and you look for files. There's some weird UI bug going on GitLab right
Before
now.
you continue, are we keeping it safe? Those might be internal notes, so we'll probably just mark this as private.
Yeah, I'll mark the video as private for now. But TLDR is we can't. I don't know why this looks like that. Did someone break like the UI for dark
Oh,
mode?
are you on Edge?
Yeah,
It's broken in
Maybe.
Safari too.
it's an edge thing, you think?
I'm joking. I don't know, but
Yeah, it's broken in Safari today too. I noticed this earlier. A photo.
you're certainly an Edge case user right now.
I'll probably have to yell at foundations or something. So anyways, if you can see the text here, he's basically saying that we can't call Git directly. Oh, here it is. So I had Greg Alfaro look at the stuff. He's gonna look at Chokedar, which is what we're using to watch files on the desktop. I don't think that's an issue for Web IDE because you probably can just supply a watcher, some watcher interface. But where I was going with this is we can't call Git directly, and we're gonna need to start doing a lot of Git stuff. Not even probably just for AI features, but for anything else that we want to move to the language server and have shared logic. Someone just did like a community contribution on the VS Code extension for pipelines and stuff. Maybe you want to like also tie some commits to an MR and all the other editor extension features. Like the goal is basically getting Git in the language server, like a native Git implementation. And isomorphic Git covers a lot of the spec compliance. Um, so that's a little bit of background on that. So FS client isomorphic Git basically expects this. Sorry, let me shut my door real quick. So yeah, so isomorphic Git and probably any other FS operation we want to do right now. So in the MRs, the MR chain that I have. So let me go to the MR chain, and I'll just go to repository service. This is like more implementation details, but I created this empty FS client. It essentially inherits all of the classic Node.js methods that you would need for any like file system client. So, and this is exactly what isomorphic Git expects. So the documentation for that is if you go to their website and you go to FS. There's also browser FS, Lightning FS. I think you guys even said you chose not to use browser FS for some reason. So,
No, we are using browser FS.
oh, you are using it?
Yeah.
Oh, that's perfect. So then this might be good. So I'll link this here because this is what we expect. And
browser FS is a weird package though, where it's like the last commit was some years ago, but it's basically because the author's like, this is done now. Like,
yeah, yeah.
it which is kind of makes sense because it's like, oh, I guess it is. There's not, what new is happening in the world of file system interface, but it's a weird package. So I think we've also copied just some of the code internally so that like we'd be able to maintain it. I'm not sure which parts that was, but yeah, browser FS is that's definitely providing some interface and implementation for file reading. There's definitely some weird quirks with it that we had to wrestle with as well. But anyways.
Okay, cool. So that's really good to know then, because that was my main concern with like this FS client. I think we can probably, I put it to do in the code to deprecate this file resolver, because this is just calling Node.js read file. So I think we can just nuke it and then just move all the the file calls to FS client, which is just node FS in desktop land. And let me move Node.js to here. And I'll change the direction of the arrows. So one thing, so for the on the desktop world, we are supplying the following dependencies. So for the file resolver, this is just like, you know, Node.js or like fs.read file, right? Async. The directory walker, or I guess desktop directory walker, this uses F directory, which is like a super fast like file system directory traversal. It's actually like faster in Go in some of the testing I've done. It's pretty wild. This allows you to resolve, you know, a bunch of files directly. So we actually use this. I want to like write some article or something about the native Git implementation that I'm working on for all of this stuff. But TLDR, this allows us to get all the files in entire user's workspace really fast, and then we're parsing all of those files on the fly to build the exact state of your Git tree. So that's why we're using F directory for, you know, traversal. So I'll just say traversal, and then Chokadar for file watching.
Can you
So
elaborate? Can you elaborate why we can't call Git directly?
um based on like what I was talking about with Greg, like shell execution issues, Git incompatibility issues, like it was security wise, he was like, it's probably better to do a native implementation than calling Git. That doesn't mean we can't call Git in the web IDE, because that, I mean, you guys already probably have Git and you can probably just call it in that case.
The web ID is a it's a magic trick to make it look like Git.
Interesting.
I think
Um,
the security concern stems from just shelling out. Like we don't want to shell out with no arguments at all. If we control arguments being passed to the get command, that's fine. And we just
that's a
make it.
really important point. I would just be concerned about like if desktop directory walker, this fdir, if that's uh working really performantly, it's like, is this behind the scenes calling git ls tree? Because like that'd be the fastest way to get all your git files.
No,
And
this is
okay,
straight up calling the file system.
interesting.
No, it's not even built for Git. It's built for just, you want to crawl a directory really fast.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what it's built for. It's pretty insane. It does like all of GitLab development kit, including every nested repository, in like 500 milliseconds. It's like,
Oh,
it's pretty wild. So yeah, so these are the two dependencies, and then of course FS client is literally just node FS, right? Um, so what we need to do is think through in the web IDE world how to supply these dependencies, or if we just supply Git in general and call a common Git interface.
yeah.
Uh,
So I'd I'd like to consider introducing an abstraction of because this is all crossing the architectural boundary of our language server process. We have extensions, but now the language server is needing to talk to file system.
mhm.
I think, and we can have it split up into different kind of interfaces that provide behavior like this, but almost just one single file system interface I find to be convenient and makes sense, because that is just like one architectural concern in our
Yeah.
block. So um I think kind of having a facade / adapter pattern of just one file system with each of the methods that we're using and needing to implement.
Yeah.
Under the hood, it uses desktop directory walker or uses the FS client or file resolver or whatever, but I
Yeah.
think that would be the easiest to support 2 implementations
That
of
makes
this.
sense. So
this
really
thing.
just one FS client in general.
Yeah, FS client or calling it file system. So we call it file system on the web IDE.
Yep.
I think the reason I'm inclined more towards, well, file system to load a term, like it's gonna be referenced everywhere. Like everything's called file system. Yeah, so whatever we want to call that. Yeah, and so the other constraint to be concerned about when thinking about how this works with the web ID is we learned the hard way that the web ID is not able to send non-serializable data to the language server. So language server is implemented as a web worker.
Yeah.
And when we're posting messages back and forth from extension to language server, everything has to be serializable. So we will not be able to send, we won't be able to send implementations
For
from
sure.
the web ID.
Yeah, it's like a regular worker or like a Node.js worker, right?
Right. So
Yeah.
instead, I'm gonna try to draw. This is usually, it takes me a couple iterations before I find a diagram that I like. But instead, I'm almost anticipating that the web ID implementation.
Yeah.
So let's call this. So we have common code. How do I want to do this? So I'm gonna put something here. Let's maybe put all of this in a block. I know this is weird. I'm sorry. I'm messing up your stuff. And this is all file system implementation or something.
Yeah.
Okay.
Nice.
All right. What the web ID is going to have to do, or our web ID version, or if we want to call it browser version, whatever, it's going to have to VS Code extension. It's going to have to make requests to GitLab VS Code extension.
And then to web ID, right?
Yes. Well, here's the interesting thing. So it can make requests to GitLab VS Code extension. But I think
one thing is I'm wondering is how would you do the request, because I don't think the server can request the client, only the client can request the server, right?
I have can the language server make requests to the extension?
Yes.
It can?
Okay.
I think it's
Direct.
by yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, the language server can make requests to the extension. And so for each one of those methods, however we want to implement it, we'd have to implement it as a request to the extension. And the extension on the browser implementation of this extension handles these requests.
Yeah.
The web ID can provide, we can either proxy the requests over to the web ID, or the web ID can actually provide when
The actual interface.
yes, because all of that is in the same, that's all in VS Code land. We're not crossing web workers and stuff.
Okay, so it's the same runtime.
Yeah, so whenever we do get extension web ID, the web ID sends back this like web ID extension. And that can include, that can include file system,
Nice.
Jeez. Okay. Yeah, whatever. So I think that's one way we can implement it on the web ID side. I think the question that comes to mind is are there any operations that would not lend itself well to this request response thing? The watchers kind of come to mind.
That's what I was wondering. So watcher, I mean, the language server could also accept notifications.
Right.
and you just send any file change notifications.
Yeah.
Mm.
Right. So I think it's doable. I think it makes sense for the web IDE to provide the file system implementation. If maybe the web IDE can get this interface from the language server so that the VS Code extension has as little logic as possible, you know, and is just kind of doing the,
Like we export the interface as types.
yeah.
Okay.
If the web IDE can import the file system type, so it knows it's providing all of the right functions or something, and then the responsibility here, it'd be neat if the responsibility of VS Code extension was just routing. I don't know.
Okay. Yeah, that could be. Yeah, this is great.
The responsibility here is the implementation.
And the watcher, by the way, is the virtual file system. So for the watcher, we have this thing called the virtual file system. We can rename it too. This is basically a giant event emitter, and it emits two events. One is all files in workspace. Um, all files in workspace, and also file change events. So that's why Tristan was like, I'll prove this anyways, because these two operations are fine regardless of the implementation details here. Do you think it can supply like the web
Yeah.
ID? Think it can do these events?
Yes, we already have to do that to VS Code. So what's happening behind the scenes with the web IDE is the web IDE has its own file system package where we've implemented a file system that can we have our own interface, but it's basically like, okay, we spin up the browser FS things, we spin up the source control stuff and everything like that. But we already have to provide, then we plug that implementation into VS Code's interface, or like how VS Code wants us to provide a file list and these kind of events. So yeah, these events were already, the behavior's already there. I think it's just providing it to a consumable interface for the language server. So that, to me, that would be, I think, the most important bit is I think it'd be really helpful to just have one file system interface for all of the file system specific things we want to do in a secure way. Like,
what about file URIs? That was my last question. What does the file URI look like? Is it a URI or is it just a path?
let me think.
Like you launch the web IDE, you pull up source dash index.ts in the web IDE. That URI of the file, is it a URI, the actual data, or is it
it's there's
oh, I think we lost him. He's frozen. Paul, we lost you.
we can massage that however the implementation is needed, where it can be just, so like slash can be the root of the project.
I was gonna say we lost you for the first whatever you just said.
Oh really?
Yeah.
What did I say? Let me see if there's a room open real fast. I'll be right back.
Okay. Hopefully this is making sense. I don't know, Dewey or Lena, if you guys have anything, or Aaron. But definitely need to simplify it. All the current code we have.
I'm always on board with simplifying things. One of my questions was going to be around how we could sort of treat the package, because right now I felt like the directory walker was gaining a lot of responsibility because we were looking at file watching as
What happened? Sorry, you.
sorry, yeah, the alarm started going off, so I had to shut the alarm off. So the directory walker, like because it's watching files as well as just going through and recursively grabbing files whenever we need them, it's just gaining a lot of responsibilities. But to Paul's point, like having like one sort of like interface to look at for the file system, that's something that we have in VS Code
Yeah.
and
Hey.
Node.js, right? Hey, Paul.
Right. Hey, and now we can have a more private, intimate conversation about the web IDE. What were we talking about?
File paths.
Paths. I think it may be something to solve, but all the information's there. So we can make the path whatever the interface is expecting it to be, we could do it because I think that works out. I'm pretty sure like we actually have it, the file system gets initialized where there's this repo root, which is like the main directory that the stuff gets opened up in.
Yeah.
And then yeah, we just respond to other things. It's an implementation browser FS, so I think the paths work out.
Yeah, I was gonna say, everything that I wrote is under VS Code URI. So anything that's expected is like an actual URI interface. Like I'll show you. So like virtual file system, for instance, where is I going? So the watcher as an example. So the listener, you just provide a listener, and then you got this workspace file event. It expects a URI. So it's like literally VS Code dash.
Yeah.
So, and this is just a object with the VS Code URI package. So as long as we can pass that,
I see. Yeah, I think that's doable.
Can you deserialize that from like for if I was using JetBrains or Eclipse, for example, and I sent it, it's going to be like file colon slash slash, and then you can deserialize it from the language server?
yeah, so that's the main thing in the language server spec. For instance, when you guys send open tabs, it should be a URI. It should not just be like a regular path. So whatever we give back to you will be a URI if you need to get something back. They will always be in URI format.
Yeah.
And so the parsing is all done on the language server side. So, like you probably would maybe, if it's not in URI format, you would probably need in the implementation details here to like, convert path to URI, which is just calling URI parse.
Yeah, that would be interesting.
Yeah. So
can I show the something with the web ID code just a second? Verifying Visual Studio Code. See, I turned my computer off and now everything is like waking up. I don't know how I turn my computer off. See, Aaron.
Oh, he did before we could say hi. Bye.
So one of the things that was really helpful here with the web ID was putting all the file system stuff in its own package, such that crossing this architectural boundary didn't bring with it any Visual Studio concerns. So what's cool in that sense is like, we update Visual Studio, we've made other Visual Studio changes, but I probably haven't had to touch this package for a couple of years because like this file system bit doesn't really change a lot.
Doesn't change, yeah.
It just implements a virtual file system. So I know that the language server now has packages I think that would be interesting for us to like, okay, here's our file system interface package, here's the desktop implementation of the file system, and here's our browser implementation of the file system. I think that'd be interesting just to enforce that we don't mix concerns that shouldn't be mixed with the file system.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And I think the VS Code URI comes to mind because like, okay, is that gonna play nicely once we want to enable this with the other extensions and stuff? And but I don't think that's a big concern. Yeah, we could totally make it conform to that.
Okay.
But I personally have found a lot of benefit with the web IDE when it's like, okay, file system is its own architectural concern. It gets its own box. And we're going to be very touchy with what kind of dependencies it uses. And we don't want to mix
Yeah,
other
that makes sense.
concerns.
If we did our own package, and then you could even like expose the types and then import those types to the VS Code extension.
Yeah. So yeah. And that'd be great.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds good. And then we can just put everything else as implementation detail under each method and whatnot.
And we wouldn't need to, just to over communicate, we wouldn't need to separating these packages. We need to publish any new package because the main package can import from all the like private inner packages. We could just
Yeah, I think I saw that like John is already exporting a type from one of the smaller.
It just helps us, enforce like dependency boundaries of like this bit doesn't depend on the rest of our project dependencies. And I think
Okay, so let me write that down then. So we would do like basically shared common interface, right? As standalone package.
Yeah.
Call it FS client or whatever.
Yeah.
Then the next thing would be publish that package, right?
Or I guess we could expose the types, whatever types we want to do there.
But my question is, where's the implementation details done for each one?
Right. So then I would if I was doing this, and this is when, this is when everybody's preferences starts to come up. This is what I would call it. And I would but my preferences I've learned are weird. So don't feel like you have to do it this way.
No, I mean whatever you want to call it, I'm cool with it.
So like I would call that package like FS types or like FS or maybe even just FS core or something like that. But then FS desktop is the desktop implementation for
I see. So you make 2 packages or
I'm thinking
3
packages.
Where I guess the browser will have some small things it needs to do.
Yeah, so we can call it FS browser or FS web IDE, which this one knows how to do that communication to
VS
the
Code.
routing to the VS Code extension and stuff like that. So for me, it's like, okay, I have this package, and then I have, an implementation is a separate concern.
And then the entry point, so like under main node, you would import the desktop dependencies you need and inject those dependencies in the shared package.
Yeah.
Then it should
But we don't need those dependencies for the browser one. So that kind of helps out,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then once this is in, all the other you get all the features for free. Theoretically.
That's gonna be awesome.
Like like literally any feature that we do with file system stuff.
Yeah.
So like we're gonna do DaVinci, some of the start DaVinci, some of it soon. So like auto imports. So like if you're writing code suggestions, it'll like parse all the imports in JavaScript files and resolve them recursively.
So there's one gotcha with this that could be a problem that we want to make sure we're cognizant of. So in addition to the web IDE implementing source control and the file system like virtually, and you kind of have to interface with the web ID that way. We can't just provide you, oh, here's a node file system thing. We haven't solved the problem of caching all the content for files locally. So every time a file is opened or requested, that's when we're going to kick off a network request to get the content for the file. So this is fine if you're like requesting 5 files.
Yeah. But yeah, not you're gonna like, that's crazy. Okay.
So
That
would be a problem to solve. If
you'd have to
these
do some like browser caching and stuff essentially.
well, what I think, so GitHub somehow does this. I think did you all ever watch Silicon Valley?
Yeah, of course.
I kind of think they have like Pied Piper like implemented, where I think they can like download this zip archive of their content, and then they're able to like search and pull it really quickly. Because otherwise, like I've tried opening it with the GitLab development kit project, like I've tried opening it with the main GitLab project on like GitLab.dev or something. And it starts downloading this big archive of all the files, but it's like not taking up a lot of space. And so I'm thinking they must have like have some secret compression searching algorithm that they have.
Definitely have Pied Piper running it.
But that's something I think we'll need to, and yeah, figuring out, we definitely, caching is a big deal because we don't want to do that. You know, if I'm opening the same files, and anyways, all of it to say is that problem's not solved. So with these features, we want to be really concerned about, and the web IDE is really concerned about the number of files we're opening at the same time.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like that, we're gonna need to do that, and that's a good point because all the repository stuff, it reads, get ignores, and parses them on the fly. So, yeah, that's a good call out.
So maybe even just like, because we can have these different implementations, maybe even having the browser implementation, some of these things take like a limit parameter or something, like just as a quick, you know, fix. We do the file content reader like does a, what's it called? It'll do a limit so that we don't exhaust the GitLab backend too much, like if somehow. So we do have some limiter in place, but it's going to be a really bad user experience if, like, you know, something is spun up trying to read 100 files and then now when they're clicking on a file, nothing else is reading and it's all waiting in a queue for that thing. That's gonna not be a great experience. So
yeah, okay, that makes sense. I also want to move all of our file system stuff to a worker, like a node worker, so we don't block the main thread as you're like indexing repositories and doing all that stuff.
yeah, if you have any ideas how we could like download all the file content for the main GitLab project on the web ID, and get it functional working, let me know.
That's a crazy hard problem to solve. That's why I try to use development kit as a benchmark for everything. Because it's just like the easiest surefire way to know whether your stuff works. Like I just all the MRs that I'm pushing through, I just tested it on development kit and it indexes all of the files. I can show you guys if you guys want to see.
Yeah.
A little demo. Because the goal would be to have something similar on web ID. So let me make sure I'm on the right. Yeah, I am. Desktop. think I should be able to, let me go to debug without build. Yep. Cool. Let me open this up on development kits. I want to try GitLab too with like every single GitLab repository, but why is it? Oh, let me stop sharing my screen because I need to set up my token real quick. 1 second. I was doing it with GDK. I made that mistake once showing my token, and then they found it on YouTube. But
yeah.
thankfully, I like removed it right before I published the YouTube video, and so they were like, "Oh, we don't have to open an incident or anything." That would have been bad.
Oh, no. Yeah, and Summit, I got to talk with one of the security engineers that built the like video token
Yeah,
parser thing. It was really interesting. But
yeah,
yeah,
it's pretty wild technology. I had no clue that was even a thing until they caught me, basically. But luckily, I
yeah.
like.
I think it's effectively like doing OCR in like every frame and seeing if there's anything
That's
token-esque. No, actually, but I don't know if it's even token-esque. I think it's based on like known secrets, maybe too. I don't know, but it's
okay. All right.
Wait,
Hacker-
what
our
is
security team's so good. I
Yeah,
love
they're
every
amazing.
time I interact with them.
So yeah, so if you see this here, this is it spinning up. This is it finding, it found all like the nested repositories in here, and then it's
Oh
checking whether
wow.
they're enabled or not. And then it runs it through the repository service. So this is creating a real-time state. It's basically rewriting Git to a degree. So you can see it's adding all the files. So this is all the files under GitLab development kit added to the repository service. We still have this weird like VS Code thing where it does it like multiple times, so I don't know why. But even then, like it still added all of them. So now you in this like repository service, I mean, just to show you, you can go to chat. Like the feature that this is enabling is you go to files like this, and then I can
Yeah.
search any file, but there it doesn't include ignored files. So like it's only searching the current state of
Nice.
your just
Yeah.
like if I add or remove a file, just like this, I'll show you. And it's not ignored. We'll just add one under GitLab. IPaul.ts. It's not ignored. So so you can see it added it to the repository service. And then anytime you query, it queries that repository service. So I can, well, I have the tab open, so let me remove that. Now I can search again. And it's there in the repository. And
Nice.
so you can use this method to get any file in a repository, check if it's ignored. Later on, like we're gonna be able to do really cool stuff, like you can pin a commit. It's gonna get like the stuff we're gonna do, it's gonna be cursor level. It's just this is setting up the scaffolding. This repository service is kind of like the entry point for everything, and it includes the GitLab status. So we're gonna move the Duo project access checker to the repository service. So you see this project. This is the actual namespace project. This is not the
Oh, interesting. This isn't
path.
your file system project. Yeah. That makes
Yeah,
sense.
so you can see this is the
That's
actual
cool.
path.
Okay.
And then this is the namespace or path with namespace. And this is using the logic that was in the VS Code extension that Tomas wrote for parsing Git configs and URIs and all that stuff.
Yeah.
In this, so you can know the actual project, and then that lets you do stuff like this. So like when we do AI context policies, if we go to it's under my developer kits. I have like a bunch of testing things. So like this nested repository here, so it already indexed. And then if I search for the sensitive file, which is Duo disabled, sensitive, if I can spell it. I can't add it
Mm.
because the project is disabled. And this is and notice this is the path, but this is the actual project on GitLab.com because I disabled it on GitLab.com.
That's interesting.
So
Cool.
that's like where we're headed. So I just want to make sure the web IDE can do all that stuff, basically.
Yeah. Yeah, and if there's to some minor extent too, like it doesn't even have to do to the same strength that the desktop can, but in addition to also just beefing up the web IDE, we save ourselves so much future headache the more we can architect for both the desktop and browser environment, because otherwise we're like what we're stuck in right now, which hopefully we're exiting pretty soon. But like we have two different code suggestion implementations because
Yeah.
the web IDE is using this old one
The VS Code one.
because we don't have the language server working. So the more we can homogenize our architecture and just have different implementations, that's ideal. Yeah, I've got one more question for you.
Okay.
On the web IDE, while we like iteratively provide a implementation for web IDE stuff, I imagine like there's some functionality that will be available, some functionality that won't be available yet on the file system. Like that might be, we might have a middle state. I already mentioned a constraint about like reading a bunch of files. I could see it being needed to maybe in some of our common code needing to just ask like a permission check, like, hey, can we watch files? Can we do this? If so, go down this path. Otherwise, we're going to go down this path. Maybe we control that with feature flags or something.
Yeah, that's a good point.
But I'm also curious, like from the desktop perspective, is it possible that we run into permission issues from the desktop perspective as well? Like is the language server, is it possible that reading folders is not allowed by the language server process in some environments or something?
That I don't know. So that's what we're gonna have to. We'll get there when we get
Find
there.
out the hard way. I love it.
That's a good point, though. I don't know how to get around that other than like.
And maybe it's just a matter of like just okay, this is a new requirement. We got to bubble up like a permission, like hey, allow the language server to read your file system for
something like
things.
that. Yeah.
Then, or the language server is requesting its permission, but if they deny it, then it's like okay, we gotta want to make sure we don't just keep going down, keep throwing exceptions. We want to somehow save that and cut off that behavior or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, you could even make it part of like configuration, like the config,
yeah,
pass in the language server, be like allow privileged access or whatever. I think you have to the OS, the machine OS, you have to allow it though before you do that or something.
yeah, I think and maybe that's the bit is maybe Node has like some functions that are like request file permission or something.
And that's part of the reason why I think also they Greg was like just implement a native one because then we control everything. So if someone puts something malicious in a git ignore or whatever, we're parsing it and we're not relying on a shell for whatever reason.
That's a good point. I think from security perspective, if we were just because we've run into situations where a malicious repository has like an evil script named Git. And so if something is like just, oh, we're going to run Git, it actually could be running something, triggering something evil on the computer. So yeah, I think it's a really good point to not spin off processes. Even though it's inconvenient, it's wildly inconvenient.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that I had to rewrite part of Git was quite annoying, but it was cool. It was a good learning experience, that's for sure. Definitely like one of the harder things I've done, computer sciencey type things.
So yeah, so I'm gonna have to. I'm one of these days I'll have to steal your git ignore processing because I think there was an issue for like the web IDE doesn't respect git ignore stuff and like
it doesn't.
Oh, dude, I can't
Oh,
emphasize
then you gotta
how
then just steal it. Like that's what
I'm
I was
totally
saying.
going
Like,
to. Yeah, yeah, I'm totally going to.
I might just like copy it. It is MIT, so I might just copy and republish it as an actual
That's a
thing
great idea.
because isomorphic Git. So what Lena comments on the thing. She was like, "Have you tried like the isomorphic Git like get status matrix?" I was like, yes. I ran it on because the benchmark is always the development kit. So the same thing. I ran basically the exact same code, but what they do is they do it iteratively. So they walk the directory, they parse it, they walk the next directory, parse it. It's just like there's no parallelization, there's no like optimization, and it takes 13 seconds for just GitLab, not GitLab development kit. So I was like, that's unacceptable. Like, no one's gonna wait, 13 seconds to search some files or like pick up a file change, let alone all like the computational resources for that. So I was like, we got to make it faster. So I stole a lot of the isomorphic Git's code, like the core code, but then what it's using is using some trie data structures to like anytime you traverse a path, it only goes through the path that it needs to, checks the get ignores that it needs to, which saves a lot. And then on top of that, for detecting all the repositories, it uses that same trie directory structure match or whatever. And then also it uses F directory to get all the files up front. So you're not like crawling and then parsing at the same time. If it was like Go or something, you'd be able to get away with that because you could just spin off like 10 workers. But yeah. Yeah. So I want to write like an article on it or something.
Cool. Yeah, that's a good idea. You should do it. Yeah. That's interesting. Yeah, thanks. Thanks. I hope was this helpful? Do you feel like there's a good path forward?
No, I think we have a good path forward. I mean, we're gonna have to. I think we should spin up like I don't know, like 40% engineering epic time to do it, but I think it'd be well worth it because it'd be huge if we say, hey, this works on the X features work on the web IDE too.
Yeah. And let's we can also set up time. I think for the engineering effort stuff, I find it really helpful one helpful tool to make sure that stuff gets done is to set up just pairing times where we're going to pair up on it. So otherwise it's easy for it to get lost. So if we want to set up some pairing times where we're coding and exploring some of the interfaces and packages and doing some of that stuff,
Sweet.
let's do it. I'm game. Monday is a good day for me.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, I'm definitely down. Once we get through all this, like these crazy deadlines, I'll definitely be down. So,
Oh yeah.
sweet.
Yeah.
All right, sounds good. Well,
See, you got to stop. You got to stop meeting the deadlines. Otherwise, they expect the deadlines.
We didn't meet this past one, so they wanted it done
That's
last
good.
week.
You got to keep them there. Yeah, I'm joking. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So like, I don't know if you saw, like, look at the MR train. You're gonna be like, and they wanted in by Wednesday. So I'm just like, I put a bunch of to-dos on everything, and I'm like just making it clear, like if it's a to-do, it's a to-do. I can't help you. And everything's behind like a try catch, so it's hopefully not gonna blow up the language server. But it's working so far on development kits, so I think it would work for people. I haven't tested it on Windows, so you just reminded me. I need to annoy John and tell him to spin it up. But I might just wait till the code's merged and then we'll fix the bugs.
Yeah. The Windows thing is really interesting. We ran into even a web ID bug because from Windows users, because we had some sort of assumption about the way the paths were going to work. And VS Code, even though it's on the browser.
Yeah, so I made sure all my paths also check this. And I was like, and we found that out in the first time we did the Duo project access check or whatever. Yeah. And John and I spent like 2 hours debugging it, and we figured it out. And it was literally just because it was checking this versus this. I
released the new web ID and then go on vacation, and I see like it got broken for Windows users, and I was not expecting it. So like, it's on the browser. How in the world are we like caring about the file path? But some like baked in VS Code logic was like something like, are you on Edge? They were going to use the file path like the other way. It was like,
I was gonna say that fun fact, VS Code has copied all of Node's core POSIX logic and into their
Oh, really? I think I've
found
seen. I
that.
think I've come across it too. I know what
I
you're
had
talking
to copy some of their code, and then it just kept getting more and more. I was like, I have to cut it off at some point.
Yeah.
So we're using we're Lena reviewed it. We're like patching anytime there you need to get a relative path. I'm just using the path browser file or whatever. So if it's like in the web IDE, hopefully it'll work, but it might not take. It might not. Hopefully POSIX takes care of the backslash. We'll see. We'll.
All right. Cool. All right. Thanks for putting this together. It was good seeing you all. Have a
Yep,
good rest of the
sure.
day. Bye.
All right.